Welcome to this KTV special interview. We're here where I host His Excellency Mr. Abdullah Shahid, President of the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly, who is here in the state of Kuwait on an official visit. Your Excellency, welcome.
Thank you very much.
And it's a great honor to have you here with us today.
It's my pleasure to be here today.
Your Excellency, let's begin. Tell us first about your first impression visiting the state of Kuwait.
Well, to return to Kuwait is always like coming home. I have been to Kuwait a number of times, of course in different capacities. This is my first visit to Kuwait as the President of the General Assembly. I visited Kuwait in my capacity as the Foreign Minister of the Maldives, as Speaker of the Maldives Parliament, and many other capacities. But as I said earlier, it is always like coming home for me.
That's excellent. Your Excellency, how important is this visit to the state of Kuwait?
Well, Kuwait has been a very ardent supporter of my presidency of hope at the United Nations. The state of Kuwait is one of the vice presidents of the presidency of hope, the 76th presidency at the United Nations. And because of the commitment of the state of Kuwait, especially His Highness the Emir and His Highness the Crown Prince and His Highness the Prime Minister, to multilateralism, to international cooperation, it is very important that I, as President of the General Assembly, come to Kuwait, convey my gratitude and admiration to His Highness the Emir and the leadership of Kuwait, and to the people of Kuwait.
Your Excellency, you're always welcome here in Kuwait anytime. Since your visit to Kuwait, you have also met with the top government officials during your time. Let's highlight some of those visits that you had. You had the pleasure of meeting His Highness Sheikh Ahmed Nawaf Al-Ahmed Sabah, the Prime Minister. Tell us about how that meeting went.
Well, the meeting with His Highness the Prime Minister, Sheikh Ahmed Al-Nawaf, was an opportunity for me to convey the gratitude of the United Nations and the Presidency of Hope to the outstanding support that Kuwait has given to me and to the United Nations during this 1 year. Also to commend the leadership of Kuwait in promoting multilateralism, in providing humanitarian assistance, and most importantly, for being a beacon of hope for mediation. Kuwait has maintained a foreign policy whereby it is able to reach out to many countries at very sensitive and critical times and find solutions through mediation. Now, this is a position which not many countries are, but throughout history, Kuwait, under the wise leadership of its leaders, have been able to maintain that, and this is commendable.
Excellent. You also had the chance to meet with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sheikh Dr. Ahmed Nasser Mohammed Sabah. Could you tell us about that?
Of course, it is always a pleasure to meet my dear brother, the distinguished Foreign Minister, Sheikh Ahmed, a person of great knowledge, in-depth knowledge of not only the region, but also of what is happening around the world. Someone with whom I have been able to work very closely during this 1 year as the President, and also during my time as Foreign Minister. And I wanted to convey my gratitude and also benefit from his wise counsel on what is the developments that are taking place. I had the opportunity of getting a briefing from Sheikh Ahmed on the current situation of the region, as well as the developments that are taking place around the world. It is always good to touch base with the distinguished Foreign Minister of Kuwait. I leave Kuwait with more knowledge and more importantly, more educated.
Well, you also had the chance to meet the Minister of Information and Culture and Minister of State for Youth Affairs, Abdulrahman Al-Dairi. Now, this meeting, I would like to know more about your impressions, especially with the work that was done with the youth.
Youth is an area where I give highest priority during my presidency, because today we have close to 2 billion youth around the world. Many countries have very large youth population. So it is important that we give our highest consideration to youth. We give our youth an opportunity to be part of the conversation, to have them around the table and prepare them not only for tomorrow, but get them involved in our decision-making process today. The meeting with the youth minister was very, very useful for me. I was briefed of the good work that the Kuwaiti government is doing to promote youth, a population which is substantial here in Kuwait. And I'm very impressed by the programs and projects that have been undertaken to get the youth involved in the processes, so that tomorrow they will not be only leaders, they will also be a group of a generation which has been involved in getting themselves to tomorrow.
Well, this brings me to another question. The State of Kuwait and the United Nations focus on youth. How will engaging and enabling youth will help reach sustainable goals faster?
The youth, anywhere, any country, they're more energetic. They have more interest in what happens, because they are going to inherit tomorrow. Therefore, it is of utmost importance that when we promote the SDGs, youth be involved. We need to benefit from their energy, their fervor, their passion. If not, we will just be excluding a very large population of our community. And that is why during our common agenda discussions, we have been agreed to establish a youth office at the United Nations. I'm hoping that on my return to New York, I will be able to adopt the resolution on the establishment of the youth office, which youth around the world can work together with the United Nations, making the United Nations more relevant to the youth of today.
I hope so, sir. Would you mind telling us on the ongoing strong partnership between the United Nations and the State of Kuwait in regards to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals?
Kuwait has been a strong partner since it became a member. We have seen how Kuwait has involved itself, committed itself in many ways with the United Nations. I've just come after meeting the Kuwait Fund for Development, and they briefed me about the involvement that Kuwait Fund has with the United Nations. It's impressive. The work of the Kuwait Fund around the world, 107 countries, is the good that the Kuwaiti government and people are doing around the world in alleviating the humanitarian crisis around the world. Kuwait has been a member of the Security Council 2018-2019, a role which they performed with distinction. They were admired not only by the Arab countries, but also throughout the world, because in Kuwait we find a principled leadership, a principled state, where the country performs these obligations with distinction.
Well, with regards to the Kuwait Fund for Arab Economic Development, Your Excellency, you've always warned about the gap in financial development efforts to achieve sustainable development goals. How can this be addressed, and how do you encourage countries to do more in this field?
Well, today we have a situation where many countries are decreasing their ODA because of their resetting of their priorities. But I'm very happy to note that here in Kuwait, the state of Kuwait, under the wise leadership, has maintained, and Kuwait Fund informed me that they will continue to maintain their ODA assistance. And this is of much relief, because today the situation is around the world is not improving. Conflicts are there, long entrenched conflicts are there. We have new ones coming up. The humanitarian crisis is increasing, and the only way we can address these is through generosity that we are seeing, for example, through the Kuwait Fund.
Your Excellency, Presidency of Hope. You have set of priorities for working during the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly, recovering from COVID-19, rebuilding sustainability, responding to the planet's needs, respecting the rights of all, and revitalizing the United Nations. Now, would you kindly and briefly talk us about these priorities, and why did you choose them?
Well, I chose Presidency of Hope, the theme Hope for the Presidents of the 76th session, because I believe that, given the fact that in the last 2 years we have seen death, despair, and devastation as we have never seen around the world. The entire world has gone into lockdown. Everyone was spiraling down in a manner in which there was no hope. But I believe that hopelessness is the worst, or losing hope is the worst of hopelessness. Therefore, I wanted world leaders to stand up at the United Nations rostrum and tell their people that we have the means, we have the resources, we have the technology to promise a better tomorrow. And this is something I believe. I believe that the resources are there, technology is there, the financing is there. All we need to do is come together with commitment, and we will be able to promise and deliver a better tomorrow for our people. And that is why I have promised a Presidency of Hope. And you would know that, coming from the Maldives, a country which has been threatened by a rise in sea level and inundation, according to environmental predictions, the only thing that keeps us going is hope. Hope in humanity, the goodness of mankind, and that keeps us going. I wanted to bring that positivity to the United Nations. And those are the 5 rays that I promised. Recovering from COVID-19, I promised to work towards global immunization, partnering with the WHO to make sure that vaccine equity is achieved. When I took office, only 2% of Africa was vaccinated. And it is shameful. I convened a high-level meeting to galvanize vaccine equity, bring countries together, and wanted the vaccine producers and others to come together at the General Assembly, because the General Assembly and I have the most the power of convening to bring everyone together, and I didn't want to lose that opportunity. On rebuilding sustainably, my second ray of hope, I wanted to refocus ourselves to achieving the SDGs. In 2020, we launched the Decade of Action, but the Decade of Action has to be changed to a Decade of Recovery because of COVID-19 pandemic. The meager resources, many of the LDCs and the LLDCs and the small island developing states had to allocated to for the achievement of SDGs had to be reallocated to combat COVID-19 pandemic. Even during the recovery phase, these countries are the most affected. and finding most difficulty in recovering. So we need to rebuild sustainably. We need to make sure that we reset the clock, and move forward. Of course, the 2030 agenda, achieving the SDGs by 2030 would be challenging. But at least if we try harder, we will be able to achieve some. The third ray of hope is responding to the needs of the planet. We all know what is happening to the planet. We all know what is happening to the climate. We, in the 90s, thought that the small island states will drown and the population can be moved to higher ground, and that will be the end of climate change. But that is not so. The mantra that we have been talking about, singing, that no one is safe until everyone is safe, is a cross-cutting mantra for every international crisis. Even in climate crisis, no one is safe until everyone is safe. Because now we know that the glaciers are melting, forest fires are raging, the storms are increasing, flooding is ravaging many parts it has never been, deserts are expanding. So it's not only the sea level rise, it's everything. The entire human race is under threat. Therefore, we need to respond to the needs of the planet in a way that we have never before. And coming from the Maldives, which has a death sentence if we can't achieve the 1.5 degree target, for me to preside and not to have this as one of my priorities is not possible. And that is why I convened a high-level meeting, a moment for nature, bringing the 193 countries together and asking them to reorient their policies towards Sharm el-Sheikh, which is going to be the African COP, where we probably would be the last opportunity to come together. And I'm hoping that we will be able to do it. My fourth ray of hope is respecting the rights of all. I believe human rights has to be at the center of everything we do. And through human rights, I prioritized two issues, gender equality and the role of youth. And unless we can achieve gender equality and prioritize youth involvement in our day-to-day affairs, we will not be able to move forward. We can't eliminate half of our population and think that we are doing the right thing. Either morally or economically, it does not make sense. My fifth and final ray of hope is, of course, revitalizing and reforming the United Nations. I've been successful in getting our common agenda, the OCA, begin its implementation during my presidency. I've been able to bring the entire 193 member states together and agree on the beginning of the OCA. Well, presidency runs to only 1 year. Therefore, I think an ambitious agenda, but I'm happy that we have been able to make progress under very difficult circumstances.
Well, Your Excellency, Presidency of Hope has such honorable values, and we all hope for better to all. But I would like to touch base on the COVID-19, since we saw its unprecedented collective effort fighting the pandemic in the world. I would like to hear your input. How do you define Kuwait's important role in a world that is overcoming the COVID-19 pandemic, rebuilding sustainability, protecting the climate, and respecting the rights of all?
Well, COVID-19 brought to the center a situation where we have been reminded very strongly that it's only through international cooperation, it is only through working together we can find a way out. Many people I meet say that it can be seen as a third world war. No weapons, no bombs, no nothing, but a virus came out, killed millions, forced us to lock ourselves in our homes, not even an opportunity to meet your loved ones. Now, there's nothing more sad and tragic than what we have gone through. But the only way out of that situation is through international cooperation. That has been demonstrated very, very clearly. So if we take any lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic, if we want to be prepared for the next pandemic, if we want to have human race prosper, we need ourselves committed and recommitted to multilateralism, to international cooperation. And this is the only lesson that has come out of this pandemic.
I hope we can still recover from all the damages the pandemic has had. But let's talk about something in general. One of the most important goals of the United Nations is working to achieve education, integration, and partnership. Can you tell us more about those important values, please?
Well, the United Nations is all about international understanding. International understanding can come about if we begin the process of tolerance, of acceptance, of understanding the position of others at the very young age. And that is why, through our common agenda, the Secretary General will be convening Transforming Education Summit in September 19th, more precisely. I see the Transforming Education Summit as a beginning. It's a beginning of a process where we should be attaching great importance to look at the curriculum of our nations, to review the way that we are teaching our children, and to incorporate into it much, much more greater sense of tolerance and international understanding. Only if we target the next generation, we can make a difference. And I hope that the United Nations Charter, which is the very noble document, can be implemented effectively if we target the next generation to be true practitioners of what is enshrined in this noble document.
How do you describe the need of multilateralism in today's world, and how to keep it strong in all the challenges we're facing today, especially global challenges that can only be addressed as a collective effort or collective action?
Well, I have mentioned to you about the 1.8, close to 2 billion youth around the world. And I've made it a point to engage with the youth every time I travel. For example, yesterday I went to the Kuwaiti Institute of Diplomacy to engage with the young diplomats who are entering Kuwaiti Foreign Service. The idea of engaging with the young diplomats is to, or young people around the world, is to make sure that they get a sense of belonging, that they get a sense that the leadership in countries and the United Nations are listening to them, are providing them an opportunity to be heard. Because multilateralism, when it comes to multilateralism, we have to take into consideration the feeling of what the youth is going through today. Most of the youth that I meet, the question that they are asking is, when would you give us an opportunity to be heard? When would you give us a place around the table? And when would you stop saying that you are going to be leaders tomorrow, but acknowledge that we are present even now? So there is a lot of anxiety within the youth of today. The greatest investment that we can make in multilateralism today is to invest in the youth, for them to believe that peaceful settlement of disputes and finding solutions multilaterally, sitting around a table, is possible and is the way forward. If I may say, in the memoirs of the Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon, he talks about an instance when he lost confidence and trust in multilateralism in the United Nations during the Korean crisis. But he says that his conviction and trust and confidence was renewed in multilateralism and in the United Nations when he saw the blue helmets land in the Korean Peninsula. Now today, around the world, there are many people, the 2 billion young people are waiting for the blue helmets. Today it's not only the blue helmets, not the peacekeepers alone. It is the different UN agencies that needs to reach out to them and touch their lives. And that is what the United Nations is trying to do in education, in providing food security, in providing health security. There are so many agencies reaching out to the people around the world. But of course, this is not celebrated because this is not sensational enough, but this is ongoing. And if we can continue this, then it is the best investment in multilateralism.
Your Excellency, lastly, what is the biggest challenge you faced in your position as President of the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly in light of all the crisis, violence, and conflicts in the world?
Well, it's a very short presidency. The presidency of the General Assembly is held for 1 year. I have still not completed my presidency, so it will be not fair on the last 11 months to say that this has been the main challenge. I will, of course, be thinking about the main challenge when I step down on the 12th of September. But we are talking about 193 countries. Bringing the 193 countries together and reach consensus on issues will always continue to be the main challenge for anyone who presides, because we are talking about different geographical distribution of levels of development, of language, race. All these differences are there, political differences are there. But the whole purpose of the United Nations General Assembly is building consensus, bringing countries together so that we can set international standards. The United Nations General Assembly is the moral conscience of the international community. So for that, we need continuous consensus building. It is something that even my successors will have to go through. My predecessors, of course, went through it. I'm happy that in many cases I have been able to bring countries together, especially under very difficult circumstances.
Your Excellency, we thank you very much for your time and the opportunity to sit with you for this special interview for Kuwait Television.
It is my great pleasure, and I wish you all the best.
We are very honored, and we hope those values you stated are upheld and for the better of mankind and the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, that brings us to the end of the special interview with Mr. Abdullah Shahid, the President of the 76th United Nations General Assembly. Thank you for joining us.